بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله العلي الأرفق وجامع الأشياء والمفرق ذي النعم الواسعة الغزيرة والحكم الباهرة الكثيرة ثم الصلاة مع سلام دائم على الرسول القرشي الخاتم وآله وصحبه الأبرار الحائز مراتب الفخار ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone to the first class of the 5 fundamental fiqh principles and their branches. Al-qawaid, al-fiqhiyya, al-khamsu, al-kubra, wa ma yatafarra'u anha. The study of Islam revolves around 3 major sciences. The first being tafsir and what branches off from it. The second being al-hadith and what branches from it. And the third being al-fiqh and what branches from it. These are the 3 major sciences of Islam. We are currently studying the science of fiqh. And within the science of fiqh, there are different topics. We're focusing on, in this course, is the topic of qawaid al-fiqh, okay, or al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya. We know that the science of fiqh, in reality, la muntaha lahu. There's no end point for it. It's a science where you can study your entire life and you'll never be able to say that you have encompassed every single bit of knowledge regarding this science. The scholars of Islam, they describe fiqh as being a bahr la sahila lahu. It is a sea in which there's no shores in sight. There's no shores, there's no coasts around it. Meaning, once you begin your study of fiqh, it's like you're in the middle of an ocean and there's no end point. There's no shore in which you can arrive at and get off the ship and move on to something else. La. Rather, studying fiqh is a lifetime process. And scholars of the past have spent their entire lives in compiling and perfecting this science for the Muslims to understand. And this has been done for centuries. So if that's the case with fiqh, how can a Muslim attain an understanding of this science, despite the fact that it comprises of thousands of masail, of issues? This is where qawaid fiqhiyya comes into play. Scholars of Islam, they have developed this science in order to help the student, help the Muslim in understanding those thousands of issues. All right? They provide you general principles where thousands of issues can fall under. And this is what helps a Muslim and a student in understanding al-fiqh. Of course, you'll never have 100% comprehension of fiqh, but this is a wasila, a means in trying to give you some understanding of this science. The great Imam al-Qarafi, he said, وَمَنْ ضَبَطَ الْفِقْهَ بِقَوَاعِدِهِ اسْتَغْنَى عَنْ حِفْظِ أَكْثَرِ الْجُزْئِيَاتِ. He said regarding the study of fiqh, that whoever studies fiqh by pinpointing its fundamentals, the fundamental principles, he will suffice himself from memorizing many branches, many subsidiary issues. Whoever masters and memorizes and understands the principles, then he would save his time in studying those branches. لِنْدِرَاجِهَا الْكُلِّيَّاتِ, due to all of these juziyat referring back to the major principles. All right, so what this means is basically, if you spend your time learning the fundamentals, those branches will come easily. Those branches will be understood easily, inshallah ta'ala. And this is from the means, once again, studying qawaid al-fiqh. Studying qawaid al-fiqh gives one insight to the sharia, insight to our deen, insight to our religion, our way of life. There are certain times and instances where a person has no access to a scholar, has no access to a student of knowledge to ask them a question. So what does that Muslim do in that particular situation? These qawaid are there to help you in acting upon knowledge in those situations where you're not able to ask and find out the rulings of certain issues. These qawaid also help you in distinguishing the virtues of deeds over another. An example of this, one time Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is narrated by one of our fiqh teachers, he said that one time Ibn Uthaymin, he was asked regarding praying in the first saf, the first row at Masjid Haram, yani in front of the Kaaba. The questioner said, "Oh Shaykh, I want to pray in the first saf, the first row of salah, due to the numerous benefits therein. However, I find that whenever I try to pray in the first row, that I'm not able to concentrate in the salah." Right? Anyone who's been, for Umrah or Hajj, and they went to the mataf area, you know how hectic it gets. So this person said that he's unable to focus when he's in the first row during the salah. However, at the same time, he finds that whenever he prays inside the masjid, or maybe on the second level or the third level, where there's more space, he's able to what? Focus in his salah. He's able to attain khashya easier than if he was in front of the Kaaba in the first row. So what should he do in this instance? Should he continue to pray in the first row and lose the khushu' in the salah, or should he pray inside the masjid, inside, or on the second floor or on the third floor? The Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that he should pray inside the masjid or on the second or third floor. Now, where did he derive this from? Right? We know the virtue of praying in the first row, as mentioned in many ahadith, like for example the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, where Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "لو يعلم الناس ما في النداء والصف الأول." If the people only knew what was in the adhan, the call to prayer, making the call to prayer, and the first row, إلا أن يستهموا عليه لاستهموا. He says that if the people only knew what was in the call to prayer and the first row of salah, saf al-awwal, then they were unable to perform those actions except by drawing lots, then they would draw lots. Okay, so this is this along with other narrations show the virtue of praying in the first row of salah. However, the Shaykh, may Allah have mercy on him, said that it's better for him to pray in the masjid or on the second floor, third floor. He derived this from qawaid fiqhiyya, from the science that we're studying right now. He derived this from a principle, إن تحصيل الفضيلة المتعلقة بذات عبادة أولى من عناية بفضيلة متعلقة خارج عبادة, which basically says that fadila, or virtuous actions that are attached to the that al-ibadah, the actual ibadah, actually performing their ibadah, is given preference over those actions that are not included within the ibadah itself. So for example, praying in the saf al-awwal. If you were to pray in the saf al-awwal, or if you were to pray in the second row or the third row or fifth row or the last row, your salah is still accepted, correct? However, if you were to pray without khushu', without attentiveness in your salah, then that has a greater effect on your salah. For khushu' is connected to the ibadah itself. Understand? Where you pray in the jama'ah doesn't have a direct effect on the salah in and of itself. طيب. However, having khushu' has a direct effect to the quality of your salah. فهمت? So for this reason, Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala, he told this person to pray in a place where your khushu' is easier to attain. Right? It's easier to attain the khushu' in your salah. Right? He gave preference to that particular ibadah. Why? Because it's connected, it's within the ibadah in and of itself. All right, where did he understand that from? From these qawaid, these principles that we're going to study in this course, inshallah ta'ala. All right, so this shows the importance of this science. With that being said, before we go into the actual qawaid, studying the qawaid, the 5 major principles and their branches, we have to understand what is the meaning of qawaid or al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya. What does it mean? Now, whenever you have a term like this that's made up of two or more words, you'll find that ulama, they'll first break down the meaning of each word by itself. And then once you have an understanding of each word, linguistically, that's when they'll explain the ibarah, the phrase as a whole. Okay, so we're going to follow that same methodology, inshallah ta'ala, when trying to understand the meaning of al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya. So linguistically, we'll take a look at the first word, which is al-qawaid. Linguistically, al-qawaid means, well, first it's the plural of the word al-qaida, and it means foundation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. And remember when Ibrahim and his son Ismail alayhim as-salam were raising the foundations of the house, yani the Kaaba at Mecca, saying, Our Lord, accept this service from us. Verily you are the all-hearer, the all-knower. This is a very important dua everyone should memorize and recite at the end of the performance of good deeds. However, the shahid here, the point of benefit is the word al-qawaid and how it's used in the verse. Here it takes the meaning of foundations. All right. Also said in the Arabic language, qawaidul hawdaj, yani a camel's hooves, those four objects that are attached to the camel's feet, yani these are called qawaidul hawdaj. They're referred to as qawaid, foundations. All right. Because yani they work as a foundation for the camel to walk. So that's the meaning of al-qaida, al-qawaid in the Arabic language. As for the word fiqh, then it means al-fahm, understanding. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Hud, قَالُوا يَا شُعَيْبُ مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ مَا نَفْقَهُ. O Shu'aib, they said to him, alayhi salam, we do not understand much of what you say, when he was calling them towards tawheed. This is the linguistical meaning of al-qawaid as well as al-fiqh. Now, what is the meaning of al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya when they are brought together? All right. There are multiple different wordings used and provided by the scholars of fiqh. This is just one particular wording of the definition of al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya. It says here, الأمر الأغلب ينطبق على جميع جزئياته ليتعرف على أحكامها منه. That it is a general principle. Notice the word al-aghlabi. Aghlabi, right, comes from the word ghalib. Okay, meaning most of, or general principle, meaning that there has to be mustathnayat, exceptions, right? It's not 100% proven. It can't be applied 100% of the time. And that's a general principle with any principle. Any principle you learn, no matter what science you study, there's always going to be a principle and always there's exceptions, mustathnayat. All right? So this, for this reason, they say aghlabi. And they don't say al-kulli, al-kulli. ينطبق على جميع جزئياته, that is applied to and includes all of its secondary issues. Why? ليتعرف على أحكامها منه, in order to know their rulings. So it's a general principle that has branches underneath it. So a principle, and then you have branches, right? And then those branches have branches, and those branches have branches, etc. All right. This principle is a qaida. It's a foundation. And the reason why these principles were created, is to what? Know their rulings. Yani gather all of these masail under one principle to make it easier for the talib, for the Muslim to understand the rulings. We said here, principles are not absolute. They are exceptions. These principles possess concise wordings. You'll find that they consist of concise wordings, but cover many issues in fiqh. This makes it easier to gather and comprehend hundreds of issues, as we mentioned earlier. The rulings of these principles are derived from the text, the companions, the statements of the companions. Also, they are the ijma', consensus of the companions and scholars in general, and or from the understanding of scholars of fiqh, understanding by scholars of fiqh. All right. These rulings are derived directly from the nas, from the text. Like, for example, there's a principle, ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat. Things that were once prohibited, haram to do, become permissible due to necessities. Like, for example, we know that eating swine, pig, khinzir is haram. Drinking alcohol is haram, right? Without a doubt. There's no khilaf in that. However, if a person was about to die and they needed food or a drink, then in that case, that extreme case, it becomes permissible to take khamr, to drink alcohol, or to eat swine. It becomes permissible to drink a little bit of alcohol so that they can save themselves from dying. All right? Those dire situations make things that were once haram permissible in those particular situations. All right? This principle is derived from a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what could be translated to mean in this verse, that whoever is forced by necessity without willful disobedience or transgressing due limits, then there's no sin upon them. Right? They're forced to do that particular sin due to a certain circumstance. In that instance, there is no sin upon them. فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive them. All right? So this principle, ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat, is derived from this particular ayah. Likewise in the Sunnah, the hadith, famous hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Surely all actions are by their intentions. From this hadith is derived the principle, al-umuru bimaqasidiha, which is one of the major principles we're studying in this course. So we see that principles are derived from the text. Principles are also derived from the statements of the companions. Okay, a companion may make a statement, and scholars of fiqh uses that statement as a principle that can be applied. Like, for example, the statement of Umar ibn Khattab, the famous companion, the second Khalifa of Islam, may Allah be pleased with him, when he said, مَقَاطِعُ الْحُقُوقِ عِنْدَ الشُّرُوطِ, that rights, normal rights that a Muslim has, is cut off when conditions are made. Right? For example, in transactions, you as a Muslim have certain rights as a Muslim over your brother. However, when you make a condition, a condition in a certain transaction, some of those rights are cut off. They're not applied. All right? Likewise, the statements of the tabi'een and the tabi'een. Right? An example of that, there's a statement of the famous Qadi Ash-Shurayh, who was from the judges of Kufa. He was placed to be a judge by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, من شرط على نفسه طائعا غير مكره فهو عليه. This statement is made as a principle. Also, scholars who came after, like Imam Shafi'i, he said, يجوز في الضرورة ما لا يجوز في غيرها. There are certain things that are permissible in dire situations that are not permissible outside of those dire situations. All right. So these are some examples of how statements from the Quran, from the Hadith, al-khurad bil-daman, al-bayyinatu ala mudda'i, wal-yaminu ala man ankara, statements from the companions, as well as statements from the tabi'een, and the scholars of fiqh. We mentioned that they are derived from the text and the ijma' consensus, whether it be the consensus of the companions or consensus of the ulama. Principles are applied to actions in fiqh. All right, so these principles are only applicable to the science of fiqh, which is known as fiqh al-asghar, and they're not applicable to the affairs in aqidah. All right, aqidah has its own set of rules. It's a different science, has its own set of rules. The principles that we're going to study in this subject, fiqh, fiqh al-asghar, can only be applied to this science. طيب. It is possible to say that the first to discuss and refine and modify these principles were the scholars of the Hanafi madhab. All right, this is what the ulama of fiqh say. When it comes to the compilation of the science, the scholars have mentioned these principles were mentioned in various books when explaining Islamic sciences, but these principles were never gathered together in one book. Perhaps the first treaty, which was written that collected all of these principles in one place, was by the scholar Abu al-Hasan Ubaidullah al-Karkhi. Al-Karkhi, referring to a city in Iraq, who passed away 360 years after Hijrah, which was the same year that the great scholar Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Hussein al-Ajurri, may Allah have mercy on him, passed away. From there, many scholars came afterwards and wrote other treatises regarding these principles. So this scholar, Abu al-Hasan Ubaidullah al-Karkhi, he was the first one to gather all of these principles in one book. And he was a Hanafi scholar. He was a scholar who followed the Hanafi madhab. After he made this risala, this short treaty, scholars came after him and decided to do the same, and they refined these principles. As for the sources for this science, then each school of thought, each madhab has their own sources that they refer back to in qawaid fiqh, right? The Hanafi scholars, right? They have their own sources that they use, primary sources that refer back to, and how they derive these qawaid fiqhiyya and how they apply these qawaid fiqhiyya. From them is the scholar we just mentioned, Abu al-Hasan Ubaidullah al-Karkhi. This is one of their major sources. The scholars within the Shafi'i madhab, they have their own sources. The scholars in the Maliki madhab, they have their own sources. Likewise, the scholars of the Hanbali madhab, which is the madhab that we're following, we're understanding, we're studying, they have their primary sources as well. From them, I'll mention two here. These are considered to be the major sources for this topic. It's a book called Al-Qawaid Al-Nuraniyya by Abu al-Abbas Ahmad bin Abd al-Halim ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahumullah ta'ala. The great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah, his book Al-Qawaid Al-Nuraniyya is considered to be a primary source in this field, as well as Taqrir al-Qawaid wa Tahrir al-Fawaid by Al-Hafiz Abdul Rahman bin Shihab bin Rajab, passed away 795 years after Hijrah, which is more famously known as Qawaid ibn Rajab. This is considered to be another primary source in this field. This book, Qawaid ibn Rajab, contains 160 different principles. All right. It's important that we mention these sources because once you finish this course, it doesn't mean that you forget about it, right? You're going to have to return back to this science in order to progress in your understanding of fiqh. So you have to know which sources to return back to. This course, we're providing a basic foundation that helps you to delve deeper into this particular science after the course, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. All right, so these are some of the sources that you'll return back to. Now, what is the difference between the following terms? All right, we have a couple terms here. First being qawaid al-fiqh. We kind of understand the meaning of qawaid al-fiqh. What is the meaning of dawabit al-fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and masail al-fiqh? Well, qawaid al-fiqh, these are rulings that we're going to learn that are applied to all chapters of fiqh. So they apply to the chapters of wudu, kitab al-wudu, the book of wudu, book of purification, the book of salah, the book of zakah, the book of fasting, the book of hajj, the book of business transactions, the book of marriage, the book of qada, etc. They can be applied throughout all of the chapters of fiqh and the books of fiqh. All right. However, dawabit al-fiqh, which is the second term, these are rulings that are only exclusive to one chapter. All right. They can only be applied to a particular chapter. They're a principle, right? But they can only be applied to one chapter. Like, for example, the principle, أَيُّمَا إِهَابٍ دُبِغَ فَقَدَ طَهُرَ, or إِذَا دُبِغَ الْإِهَابُ فَقَدَ طَهُرَ, which means that whenever animal's skin is tanned, then it becomes purified. All right, whenever animal skin is tanned, then it becomes purified. This principle can only be applied to the Kitab al-Tahara. it cannot be applied to the book of Salah. It has no connection to the book of Salah. There's no chapter in which it can be applied. No mas'ala, no issue in which this principle can be applied within Salah, within Zakah, within fasting, within Hajj. All right, it's only specific and exclusive to the book of purification. That's it. Khalas. Qawaid al-fiqh can extend across many chapters. Like, for example, al-mashaqqatu tajlibu taysir, which is one of the major principles we'll study. And it means that hardships necessitates ease. Hardships necessitates ease. Meaning that if there's a hardship, then the Sharia, out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy upon his servants, there are certain concessions you can take. Like in wudu, let's say, for example, you have an illness, an ailment, where if you were to make wudu, it worsens your state. In that instance, you can make tayammum. Or let's say, for example, you're traveling and you don't have sufficient water to make wudu with, right? You only have enough to drink. Then, because of this principle that is derived from the text, what happens? You're able to make tayammum. Likewise with ghusl, right? You don't have enough water to make ghusl. You can make tayammum. All right, this principle is applied to the Kitab al-Tahara, book of purification. But it's also applied to the other chapters, like Salah. Let's say you cannot stand for prayer. You can sit down, right? If you're unable to stand, you can sit down. Likewise, fasting. Let's say you're fasting Ramadan and you become sick, right? You can break your fast. Let's say you're traveling. There's some mashaqqa, there's some difficulties. You can break your fast and make it up later. This principle, al-mashaqqatu tajlibu taysir, is applied to all chapters of fiqh, while dawabit al-fiqh is only exclusive to one chapter. All right. Then you have usul al-fiqh. This is where you learn how to actually extract rulings from the text. You learn kayfiyya istinbat al-ahkam min nusus. All right. So, for example, al-amru yufidu wujub. A command or commands in the text, an obligation. Okay. Whenever you see commands, wa aqimu salah. This is a command verb. Thus, it is an obligation to establish the prayer. All right. How do you understand that this is an obligation? This is what you study in usul al-fiqh. You study how rulings are extracted from the text. Then you have something called masail al-fiqh, and this is when you actually learn the fiqh issues. Okay, you study we had a class on Kitab al-Tahara. You learn about the types of water. You learn about utensils. You learn about wudu, how to perform wudu, the conditions of wudu, the pillars of wudu, the wajibat of wudu, obligations. Likewise with ghusl, al-masih, when to wipe, and the conditions connected to that, etc. This is what you learn in Masail al-Fiqh. In this course, inshallah ta'ala, we're not going to study usul al-fiqh. That'll be a different course, inshallah ta'ala. We're not going to study Masail al-Fiqh. Rather, we're going to study qawaid fiqhiyya, qawaid al-fiqh. And then we'll take a look at, if we have time, at some of the dawabit, some rulings that are specific to certain chapters. All right, so these are the two things we're going to focus on in this course, mainly focused on qawaid al-fiqhiyya. Does everyone understand that? Now, what are these 5 major principles? We have them right here. Al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya al-khams al-kubra. The first being al-umuru bi-maqasidiha, affairs by their intentions. The second being al-yaqinu la yazulu bi-shak, certainty is not removed by doubt. Third being al-mashaqqatu tajlibu taysir, hardship necessitates ease. The fourth being ad-dararu yuzal, removing harm. And the fifth being al-adatu muhakkama, the custom is the judge. These 5 principles will be studied throughout this course, and each of these 5 have their own branches, okay? Each of them have their own branches. We're going to study those branches as well. All right, how are we going to study these principles? Every class, we'll take a look at the meanings of these words, the meaning of the qa'idah, the principle. Where are they derived from in the text? Like, how are they derived? And some examples within fiqh. All right, these principles are considered to be al-kubra, major, because all of the madhahib, the Hanafis, Ahnaf, the Malikis, scholars of the Maliki madhab, the Shafi'is, the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab, and the Hanbali scholars of the Hanbali madhab all agree on these 5 principles. Right? There's no difference of opinion regarding these 5 principles. There's agreement. All right, that's why they call it kubra. However, how these principles are applied, that's where the difference of opinion lies in. Okay, how they are applied. Mumtaz? Also, they're called al-kubra because once a Muslim learns these principles, you'll see that you'll be able to apply them on a daily basis. Right? It's not something like, just theoretical, where you just study it, it's in your mind, that's it. La, yani these are things which can be applied right after class. All right, you'll see when we mention examples under each principle, inshallah ta'ala. And that's today's class. It's the first class, so we don't want to make it too long. Tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, we'll begin with the first principle, al-umuru bimaqasidiha, and explain it in detail. We know that whenever Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would pray tahajjud, how would he perform his tahajjud? Does anyone know? How did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam begin his tahajjud? We know that he would pray 8 rakat of tahajjud and 3 in witr, correct? He mentioned in the hadith, whenever one of you gets up at night to perform tahajjud, let him start salat with 2 short rakat, yani rakatan, khafifatan. All right, let him begin with 2 short units of prayer. Why is that? Why did he begin his tahajjud with 2 short rakats? Rak'atani, khafifatani. Scholars of fiqh have commented on this, and they say that the reason why he will begin with 2 is because these 2 light units of prayer would help him prepare for the longer standing and the longer qira'ah and the longer ruku' and the longer sujood that was in the other rak'at. We try to apply this same understanding to today's class, introduction. Try to make it concise and short, hoping that it will prepare us for tomorrow's class where we go into the actual principles. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Any questions? طيب, this is the line of poetry, or lines of poetry, which combines all of the 5 qawaid fiqhiyya made by Sheikh Muhammad Ali Adam, Ethiopian. May Allah preserve him and have mercy on him. This is a poem that was made in order to make it easy for the students in memorizing and recalling the 5 major principles. He says here, قَدْ حَرَّرَ الْمَسَائِلَ الْفِقْهِيَّةِ بَعْضُ الْمُدَقِّقِينَ فِي الرَّوِيَّةِ أي في قواعد تكون حاوية لكل أنواع الفروع طاوية بشك اليقين لا يزال. This is the first principle he mentions. وإن كل ضرر مزال. Number 2. وبالمشاق يجلب التيسير. Third principle. وإنه للعادة المصير. Fourth principle. كذا الأمور بمقاصد ترى. Right, this is the 5th principle. All right. And that's today's class. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Anything that was correct, then it's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that was incorrect, then it's only from my ignorance and from the whispers of shaitan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from it. Subhanaka Allahumma ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.